Hi there! Thank you so much for joining us today and being a part of the YPN's first ever panel discussion in a series we like to call the GIS Roundtable. In this episode, we asked recent graduates looking forward to beginning their careers in GIS to ask some of their burning questions to some industry leaders. With this discussion, we hope to connect both students and professionals and gather some valuable insight into the GIS industry and how you can maneuver yourself as you develop into a more effective GIS champion. So let's wrap up this intro and get right into our discussion with our first question from our student, Stats Wong.
Hi, so I have a two-part question. My first one is, what do you wish you'd know when you were starting out in this career path? And part two would be, if you had to start all over from the beginning again, possessing the knowledge of what you know now, what would your path look like?
Well, in preparation for this, I wrote down a lot. So I'm wondering, I'll just pick the best.
You prepared for this, Jeff? Come on.
I did. These guys put a lot of effort in, and I wanted to match it. But, I really appreciate the question, and thank you, because it got me thinking. And it's nice to sit down, because we're always forward-looking and go, okay, well, let's look back and say, what has my journey been, and how can I impart some of what I've learned on you guys. And really, I would boil it down, this first part, to a few key points. Other than should have probably bought Google stocks back when I started my career, I wouldn't be sitting here. But, I started my career in and around 9/11. And, there was some pretty massive change in the world at that time. And so halfway through my career, we had the financial crisis of 2008, which wiped out a business I was starting. So, what I really want to tell you guys is accept change, because it's constant. And especially now, as you're heading into this world where COVID is so, we don't know what it is, just accept that. I guess I've answered this question the way it's written. I should probably have accepted change and not fought it as it went along, because really you have to move with change, and with change comes opportunity. So that's just one of the 7 points I have written down here. I think some of the other things is, once you do accept that change is coming, then, you don't stop learning. You guys are now, you've got your foot in the door, right? The technology, and you can code like experts. So then really, if in hindsight, wish I had spent more time continuing to learn, but not learn technology, is to learn people and how people interact with change, and how you have to bring people through change, and myself as well. Because once you get into your career, and this really is a career, it's a career that you'll love, and your coworkers become your family. So you have to invest in them and your time. So if I was to start all over again, my career path would be the same. I very intentional about what got me here, but I probably would have achieved things quicker had I accepted change, kept learning a little bit more, and really invested in my colleagues to understand what made them tick and give them the benefit of the doubt, and work as a team. So I've earned a lot of these gray hairs, and had I not done that, I'd maybe not have as many. So that's my answer. There's many ways you can take it, but for me, that's what I pondered as I thought about this question.
So it's Joanne here, and I'll add to that. So Jeff, maybe we should have spoken a little bit before we started this panel discussion, because I'm just going to copy what you said.
Okay.
And I'm just going to piggyback off of that. I think for me, I wouldn't have changed anything I've done. And I actually didn't start off in GIS. I started off doing a psychology major, and I failed calculus twice. And I thought to myself, what can I do to get me through the next couple of years of university and get me through in 4 years while using my credits that I earned in psychology as electives. And I'm like, you know what? I've always loved geography. I'll do some geography. And I fell into GIS by accident, really. So would I have chosen GIS from the onset? Probably not. And I wouldn't have changed that. I think that things happen for a reason, and you kind of fall into your path as you go. But just to echo Jeff's comments, you get a degree or whatever, you get your degree and you have this passion for GIS. Not everyone shares your passion because they don't know about it. And one of the things that Jeff had mentioned is about, it's not so much about the technology. To me, the technology part is actually the easier thing. Mm-hmm. It's the communication with people, and being able to sell yourself and the technology as something that's needed in your organization. One of the things that maybe I wish I would change it and maybe things would have happened quicker is if at the onset I wasn't so afraid of failure. And that's one of the things that I would recommend as you're coming out of school or just starting your career. Don't be afraid to fail. If you have an idea, you want to try it out. If you fail, you haven't failed, you just learn a lesson and you move on. And I think that kind of fear of not, something not being perfect or not answering the right questions kind of holds you back. And then it just takes a little bit longer for you to get the results that you want. So my recommendation on top of Jeff's would be, don't be afraid to fail.
I would echo, to be a little bit boring, both Joanne and Jeff's assessments. But I would also add to that a couple of items. One is people often talk about thinking outside a box. And I would observe that I don't really think there's a box, and I don't think there ever has been one. And if there was one, that box has diminished enormously with the advent of recent sort of computing opportunities. So now we have a bazillion sensors in the sky, and we have a bazillion GPS devices in everyone's pockets. The opportunity to exploit geospatial things is enormous. So
I'm so jealous of that.
I know, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And in response to what Joanne was saying, absolutely give something a crack, because you just never know. I mean, who thought that viral 10-second videos would be a big thing? Hey, they are. I didn't even think that putting a camera on a phone was a good idea. And obviously I was just deeply wrong about that. Deeply wrong about that. So, doing silly things and having a crack is a great idea. And I think sort of being curious about the things that are around you and being curious about people really feeds that opportunity. I think those are things are really good. And my last sort of point of advice would be, at some point you're going to have a job, you're going to have a boss. Make sure that boss is a good one. Someone who's willing to be a little bit risky, give you some good advice, help you down the path. You're probably going to have more than one boss in your life. So figure out someone who you can learn from, figure out someone that can help you grow. There are plenty of terrible bosses, but given the state of geospatial right now, there's also a lot of jobs out there, and a lot of opportunity, a lot of jobs that don't yet exist. So don't necessarily jump for the first one. Find something that's going to help you grow. Find something that's going to help you sort of get better and become a sort of a smarter, better person.
Well, Will, I kind of wish you hadn't said that, because now I think you're giving Samaya and Guan ideas about having a terrible boss. And,
hey.
I was really hoping that wasn't going to come up here. So I don't know. So I'll try and wrap this up. And I mean, I think Jeff and Joanne and Will have really said a lot of the things that I would certainly say. I look at these questions and I've actually been struggling with them. What do you wish you'd known when you were starting out in this career? Oh boy, how long a list would you like?
I know.
I mean, but I think if I had to sum it up, one thing, when I first started on this career, I had and most a very narrow view of GIS. GIS was there was kind of this. There was this little tug of war between cartography and GIS. I remember Fleming, there were two separate programs, and I wish I'd known that in fact the breadth and the area, and Will, you kind of touched on this, that all the different areas that GIS could be applied to. We sort of saw it as a geographic information system thing. We saw it as a geography thing. So we really saw it in the realm of geography and putting a geographic lens on it. And that's certainly true. But it's not just a tool for geographers. And it would have been really neat to know that, starting out. Everyone sort of touched on the point that you don't really know what your path is going to be. Look at where I am right now. There's no way I could have guessed where I am and how I got here, 25, almost 30 years ago. There's no way I could have possibly known that. There's, as Will said, there's technology that exists now that we couldn't have fathomed or dreamed of. I just, if I could start all over, I think I would have focused, tried to take that broader focus on it and seen it from the application side of it. What can this do rather than how does it work? And I think for my personal, career path, I am now at a point where it's really all about what can this technology do, not how does it work. And I think that's something that, starting off in your path, that's almost something you need a little bit of how. You also need a little bit of why as well. And it's a bit where do you want to put your focus?
Just a little follow-up. I guess everybody kind of touched on the broader application from like the beginning. So maybe what were the first applications each one of you saw that GIS really took off of?
Well, the first applications I had, my first gig was as a spatial modeler for a land use research institute in Scotland, Macaulay, and it doesn't exist anymore. It's something else now. But I was in this weird spot where we weren't sort of really given software licenses per se. We were given data and at that point S+, which was like a proprietary version of R, and like, go for your life, Will, make me a map. And okay. So lots of kriging, lots of geostats, lots of that kind of stuff. And then eventually we managed to get ourselves into some ArcView and some Avenue at that point. But so for me, it's always been interesting. And I reflect on this because I think I've just been lucky enough to have those kind of jobs that we've always had to, or I've always been challenged to do things which aren't necessarily the traditional way that they're done. So you make a map, but I'm going to give you the wrong piece of software to make the map with. Kind of opens it shows you that there isn't a box really, and if you find yourself in one, then you can probably find yourself a way out as well. So I think that's been my career path, and that was my first introduction to GIS-y kind of stuff, other than what I did at school.
I'm going to take a little different spin on that. So I started off my career, I spent a couple years doing market analysis for some real estate departments in some pretty big private companies. And these are all things, they were very simple processes, things that we had learned in school. And the different spin I'm going to take on this is that I think not so much, I mean, there's so many things that as GIS graduates, we know that we can do, right? We're just kind of in some of our businesses, especially in policing, we're just kind of hitting the top of that. So for example, in policing, depending on what police agency you work for, just getting dots on a map where they're able to click on the dot and pull up the information was revolutionary to them. We know that we can do so much more with that information and provide direction and solve some of their issues. But that was enough for them. That was like revolutionary. And I think one of the things that kind of helped propel GIS forward, in terms of mainstream culture, was MapQuest. Does anybody remember MapQuest?
Yes.
So before Google came around, right? That was the biggest thing ever. And I'm not going to call it a GIS, but that's kind of what, people started expecting that. The ability to be able to go online and find directions to where they want to go, and they don't need a paper map anymore. And then, you have the navigation systems in the cars, and then you have the advent of Google Maps, and even Google Maps has introduced some of these very, very basic rudimentary GIS concepts that are making it more mainstream, and what people are expecting to have access to. And so I think that's kind of my different spin on it. I mean, we, like I said, as GIS professionals, we have access to some of these tools and some of these processes, where we could make some incredible visualizations and provide some incredible insight. But it's really sometimes just the basic concepts that are what propels GIS forward.
Wow. I think we've all the same vintage, because we all kind of refer back to a time when things were getting started here. So for my answer to that, I've always been very curious, and I encourage everyone who's listening to this recording to follow your curiosity. So I made my first map when I was 7 because my father said I was fishing, and I told him how many fish I'd caught that day, and his joke was, well, you keep catching the same fish over and over. So I actually made a map of the lake and where I'd caught all the fish. But I always kept that curiosity throughout my life. And in the late 90s, I had an idea. And it might start to sound familiar as I talk through it, but I thought to myself, what if I was to strap a VHS camera to the front of my truck, and I don't know if anyone remembers VHS, and drive the streets of the city of Peterborough and record the street and all the businesses on it. And what I did is I took it back and segmented the video and linked it to all the road segments, and presented it back to one of my professors, who said there's no way this will ever have any real practical use in reality, to be able to click on and see actual what's going on, whether the streets were cracked or the real estate. And I thought to myself, I don't think so. I think this actually has a thing to it. And of course, we have Street View now for that. But just follow your curiosity. I think that, for me, to answer your question, was the first project that popped into my mind of what was the use of GIS. And I thought, how can we marry something that exists to something that doesn't exist, and find those intersections where innovation can happen? So that was mine. I mean, I went on to work in forestry and then telecommunications and other areas, but I think that curiosity is pretty important.
I agree. Interesting you say that, Jeff, and that's another thing I think that the listeners should keep in mind, is that sometimes when you take this new technology to, I won't say old, I'll say the established authorities or the established management structure of your organization, it's hard sometimes for them to see that change that is coming, and see that practical. We have a joke, inside of Esri, sometimes when we're trying to show a group or a customer some new technology and they're just not getting it. We sort of say, it's like showing and Guan and Samaya are going to roll their eyes, because I say it all the time. You're showing an iPad to a caveman, right? How is this going to help me hunt deer, right? Do I throw the iPad at the deer? Like, what do I do with this? And it sort of harkens back to what I said a little bit earlier, is that sometimes the technological advance gets ahead of the need for it. So you kind of have a solution running around looking for a problem. And that's one of the challenges that we face in something, especially when the technology changes so quickly. And then all of a sudden, the lights come on, and all of a sudden there's an application for that. So that was, for me, the first couple of times, there's nothing specific, but the first couple of times that happened was really when I got excited about GIS. Is this stuff that I've been tinkering with and doing as a lab and doing as kind of a project, all of a sudden get the real world and everybody thinks I'm crazy until that one person, oh, that would really help in this situation, and then you run with it.
Given the COVID-19 pandemic, I was actually opportune to attend the Esri's virtual conference recently, and I learned that there were new technologies to solve the problems of the pandemic, especially regarding people going back to work and health and safety issues. So I want to ask which applicable technologies would be the best for managing health and safety and going back to work for people in these times, and which technology should companies and corporations should invest in to be able to keep their people safe at this time. Thanks for the question, Bukola. That's actually a really good question. And it kind of brings me back to, I was told a while ago, you never waste a good crisis. Like, the pandemic is a crisis. It's unprecedented. It's scary. But this is a great opportunity to showcase what GIS and what location analytics can help us do in humanity, really, all across the world. And so I think even just going back to work, and I think most of us are working from home. Going back to work, there needs to be a strategy, right? We need to have some social distancing. A lot of offices the cubicle spaces are too small and they're close together because we've all, have this culture of teamwork and collaboration, and we want to be together. One of the great things with GIS is, and Chris mentioned this before, is that it hits on every type of technology. So virtual reality or augmented reality. We see GIS indoors now, mapping out the space indoors. The Internet of Things, having accessibility to these sensors, and this kind of insatiable urge for everyone to have the answer in real time. They don't want to wait any longer, a day or two to see what happened 2 days ago. They want to know what's going on now. And so I think with just kind of going back to your question a little bit more specifically around COVID, is that there's a great opportunity here to leverage some of these technologies and integrate GIS into them. So, we have the Johns Hopkins, the COVID tracking application, and making that more real time. And everything, especially in a pandemic, is really the focus on that is the location, where people have been, what they might have been exposed to, all of those types of things. So I think kind of having a focus on those kind of real-time technology, the dashboarding, having these sensors in place and providing kind of real-time updates to different organizations, really at any capacity, at the municipal level, me speaking from a law enforcement background, and as well, even though it's newer, kind of that indoor GIS is being able to plan and track who's been where indoors, so that you can kind of mitigate the risk of exposure if somebody does come down with COVID-19, right? So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and I'll stop there. I'll let Jeff and Will and Chris take it from there.
If there's ever been a good time to think about not having all your data on the server beside your desk, this is it. I think this is a great time to be thinking deeply about the cloud. I think this is a great time to be thinking deeply about moving all your infrastructure to a place that doesn't necessarily need to have a bunch of people, massaging it, hovering around it, turning it on and off. I think, I really think that this sort of pandemic environment highlights a couple of things. One, knowledge workers don't really need to be anywhere because they can, by their very nature, be everywhere at the same time. If you have your resources in a secure cloud environment, then you can plug into them from anywhere, which means that, again, in the event of a pandemic, you can access those resources relatively easily. And I think if organizations haven't got to the point where they are in the cloud, those organizations that are already there are seeing much less disruption than those who are not there. And I think now is underlining that that trend, which, you know, I would say some sophisticated organizations had already adopted, but you know, like there's plenty of other organizations who are very sophisticated who just hadn't quite got there for whatever reason, inertia, sort of internal politics, whatever. Now now there's no real excuse anymore. So I think if I was to say there's one capital investment that organizations should be making, it's in transitioning to a cloud-based environment, probably cloud agnostic environment, so lots of Kubernetes and containerization, blah, 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 blah. So you can sort of move from different cloud environments to different cloud environments. But that's a little bit, you know, that's maybe too technical. In essence, philosophically, have your resources in a place where they are accessible remotely, and move on from there. And of course, have teams that are capable of communicating remotely and doing all that thing. But I would hope that as knowledge workers, we're largely there anyway. But yeah, the cloud underlined exclamation mark.
You, both Will and Joanne hit on some of my points too, but I think I'll just reiterate. So, you know, about a year ago, the Globe and Mail put out an article called Canada's Data Deficit. I'm not sure, it was quite an argument to say that we don't have our data house in order. And in York Region, you know, we really were concerned about how disconnected all of our systems were, how disconnected our business was. And we were struggling at the time to get mind share with senior managers. Well, in a undesirable event, I mean, it's not, we don't want COVID to happen, but honestly, we all need to be selling right now. And when I say selling, not in the used car salesman kind of way, but we need to be showing our organizations the value of this technology and showing them, you know, real world benefits to using it now, immediately, because we need to get our data house in order. And we've done that in York Region. You know, our website, corporate website, has gone from 20,000 hits a month to, as of yesterday, 2.5 million hits just on our dashboard, our data dashboard. And there's a lot, I mean, it looks nice in the front end, but there's a lot going on in the background to keep it together because our systems were so disconnected and so broken. So the investment I would make is use GIS as the common location or the common integration tool, so that we can get to that single source of truth. Whether it exists in the cloud or whether it exists internally, let's just get it all in the same spot, because location is the common denominator. And in a pandemic, there's no stronger business case than, you know, contact and case management and case tracking. So my 3 points, you know, go all in right now on selling the value of what we do. Connect our systems, and if you're in a two-tier government like we have, we used Esri's technology to connect to our local municipalities so that we have a single source of truth. And then invest in people, because you know, digital literacy is important. We all know the value of this technology, but we have to invest in everyone so that they can use it too. So those are the areas we've spent a lot of time in York Region on. Still ways to go. Systems are old, and you know, the vision is single source of truth in the cloud, master data management, but we're not there yet. So we have to use everything we have at our disposal to solve this problem. So.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I certainly wholeheartedly agree with the accessibility and data. I remember, and now I cannot remember, I apologize, I cannot remember the name of the publication, but I read an article during all this COVID thing. I've read many articles during all this. And the headline was, "This is our first data-driven pandemic." And I thought that was just such a fantastic way of phrasing it. And they went on to talk about how we've got all these dashboards, and to Jeff's point, you know, how data is the fuel of this. And you know, and the point we've made about how the applicability, but there's something else I think that we need to invest in that this COVID has shone a light on. And that is the notion that we really most organizations still fear and distrust, and I think it's misplaced fear and misplaced distrust. I could pick on the cloud, but just of digital data and digital information in general. And I think one of the things that we've seen in this COVID thing is that we have seen a lot of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So throwing the value of what we could have done around managing the pandemic. There's been so much fear and so much concern about privacy and misinterpretation of the data that the data has been held on to. And I think the data has been held on to far too tightly. And it's like I'm really going to date myself now by using lyrics from a 38 Special song.
Wow.
Which yeah, exactly. Which is the song is called "Hold On Loosely, But Don't Let Go," right? And I think that that's what we need to do with our data. Now, that's of course the song is all about a romantic relationship, but I think the truth is about our data. We hold on too tightly to that data. We don't get the full value out of it. And I think one of the things that we have to really invest in. It's not so much a capital thing in terms of the technology of cloud, and which we do, and the technology of integrating systems and infrastructure, which we do. But I also think we need to really sit down when the dust is settled from this thing and say, all right, how do we make data available? How do we address the concerns and our ability to get value out of that information? And I really hope that that's something that comes out of this pandemic fallout.
And we have to look at policies. I mean, this is a policy discussion because, we have various policies in place that do sort of make it restrictive. So even communication around those policies and understanding them, because, it's a big challenge.
And that goes back to saying that it's not so much the technology, but the policies and practices, right? Speaking for myself in law enforcement, we have quite a ways to go in putting our data into the cloud. But at the same time, the industry has a way to go to protecting that data, for example, on Canadian soil and having servers in Canada, right? So, but I have to say that, being in school in the early 2000s, and I think starting working, we have come such a long way. And it's to the work and to the credit to people like yourselves, Jeff, where you're making the data open for everybody. Because I remember, it wasn't so much about the GIS, but how do I get the data? How do I buy the data to get that? And it was so expensive.
Yeah.
And now it's available. It's a lot more available now than it is, but it does have a long way to go.
Yeah, sure.
I think back to the audience that's going to be listening to this, the students that are graduating now, I think they are going to be critical in doing what we're talking about, because I think that they have a comfort level and a familiarity with cloud, with sharing information, with accessing things with device. They're sort of they're not going to have the fear of it. I think they have a respect. Comes to privacy, there's the settings on my whatever Instagram profile. I think they understand that's how they protect themselves, but they have that comfort and they have that desire to share, whereas the generations that we bump into are nope, shut it down, lock it up, and because take the risk. And then to Will's point, something like COVID comes along and guess what, we can't even do our basic work. We can't even fire up our GIS desktops. Why? Well, because nobody thought to allow access to the license manager through the firewall, let alone the data, right? So we're dead in the water everywhere you turn.
The notion of open data in general is such a powerful enabler for new technology. We see it every day in the sort of tech sector. I'm super excited by what might happen with the RCM mission and open data. I think that's going to be super valuable for the Earth observation. And I reflect on what's happened with the European Space Agency and the access to Sentinel. I sat on a panel in Amsterdam last year, back when we were able to get on planes and things. And it was a startup panel, and 6 out of 7 startups were based on Sentinel or open data. You think about that, you think, okay, 6 out of 7 technology startups in one part of Europe were based on free access to Earth observation data. New, interesting things from like parking apps to various other different things, all based on free data. You think, okay, so we have RCM, we have a constellation that's about to kick off. We'll see data from it, I'm sure, any day now. But having access to a free, robust source of radar data would be amazing. And what can the Canadian citizenry create from that? I think that would be a tremendous advantage for a bunch of people who are sitting in their basements, twiddling their thumbs, looking for something to do. That sounds like a great opportunity to build a technology economy.
If I may just add one last point to all the students watching and listening, you guys are so smart. Like we hire our students, we typically go to Waterloo, but you guys come in and we learn as much from you as you learn. And I'm strongly encouraging you to come in and be bullish to us. Say, why don't you have fill in the blank technology? And maybe it's because old guys like us don't understand it. So you guys come in and tell us, what sort of machine learning models you need and artificial intelligence technologies and Alteryx and all these kinds of things. And because it could just sometimes be, we're of a certain vintage that we're going to stick with our ArcSD. And if there's other ways, tell us. Honestly, come in and tell us, because we'll get out of your way. And if you have a manager that doesn't listen to that, then you're not working for the right manager. So just come in and tell us what you need.
You need to get a good boss like Jeff.
Yeah. So my question is basically, how can we bridge the disconnect between students or younger professionals and people that have more experience, which can encourage more community engagement, especially for students like homelessness, traffic incidents, and all other things?
So that's a great question. And I certainly, bridging the professional community with students and things like that, I know it's a challenge. And it always has been. I mean, it was a challenge for us when we were students, is how do you reach out there, and how do you get connected? So just a couple of thoughts I have. There's sort of two quick thoughts I have. And the one is sort of touching on what Jeff and Joanne and Will have said, is to not be afraid. Don't sit around and wait for it. Not to continue the COVID discussion, but a couple of us mentioned the Johns Hopkins website, the dashboard that was created became the go-to place for the global pandemic, and CNN referenced it every day. It's a little known fact that was created by a student at the university. So don't for a moment think that students or professionals just jumping out can't create game changers like that. That wasn't a committee of grizzled, experienced veterans doing that. On the contrary, it was a student saying, I wonder what this could do, and doing it, and the floodgates open. The other point I'll make along those veins is that in doing something like that, it's actually never been easier to create an app like that and pull something together. With the cloud technology, with open source tools, with developer licenses, with app stores and whatnot, it's relatively, I won't say it's not easy, but it's accessible to build a useful application. If you've got an idea, kind of like Field of Dreams, there's another old person reference, build it and they might come. And get it out there, and you can build an app. You can take an idea very far and get it out there through LinkedIn, through other social media platforms. Promote that, and it could get picked up.
Yeah. It's funny. I pondered this question a lot, and I almost wonder if the premise or the way I read it was off, because the onus almost seems like the way it's written is it's on you guys to reach out to us. And I think actually we, and I say we, all of us in this industry who have learned so much and who have gained financially and become better people as a result of this industry, have a requirement to give back. And I think this is on us as GIS professionals to reach out to you and to say, look, we're here for you. And I'm more than address. And if you want to contact me, please do. And I think we need to find some sort of program. I don't know, like a big sisters, big brothers type program. I'd love to, if you want your resume looked at, send me your resume. I'm more than open anytime. That's where my head went to, is how can I give back to you guys? Because you're coming out of college, university, looking for scratch and claw, your first way in. And I think, it's those who came before in this industry, you come into it. So that's how I can answer this. I mean, there's tons of ways. There's LinkedIn. There's ways of marketing yourself. But I think the flip side is we have to do better reaching out to you guys, because, we unfortunately we're so busy in York Region. We start to think operationally. We need bodies and seats to get work done. So we go to the schools. We hire the best body. We put them in the seat. We get them as much work out of them, and then off they go. And I often feel bad for the kids, because I don't know. I wonder how much mentoring they're getting. So I took this question quite personally, and actually thought to myself, I'll throw it out here. Anyone who's on the call or afterwards wants to reach out to me, do and pick my brain.
I'm going to echo Jeff's and Chris's comments as well. It's funny because when we started, and maybe it's the same now, but when we started our careers, or at least when I started my career, I went into areas and into these companies, and I was often the only GIS person there. And they're looking, I don't have anybody to mentor me or look up to or ask questions to, because I am the only one there, because it's still such a niche, area. I think that today, given all of the open data that we have, and I'm going to allude to Chris's comments, is that we're able, and as students, you're able to develop these applications or simple mapping or create a blog or something, just even things that, that you're interested in. And again, don't be afraid to fail. Just create something that you're interested in, that you're passionate about, and advertise that on LinkedIn, or send out your links to the blog or whatever. I think too is that there's a lot of opportunity, and I often find that there's not so much student attendance to some of these kind of free or very, very cheap conferences that you can go to, and that's where you can really meet a network of people. So for example, I don't really know Jeff too well. I don't know Will too well, but we've met a few times. Will, I mean, I was volunteering for a Geo Alberta conference, and Will was one of our speakers. So we got Will to come and speak at Geo Alberta. And Jeff, we met last year at the Esri Canada conference, right? Yeah. And so you take advantage of these opportunities, and you create these relationships, and then you can bounce ideas off one another, right? I think too that I agree, Jeff, with your comment about we need to give back to those coming after us. And I agree, the students coming out now are brilliant. I mean, I've moved up the chain, and so I don't possess those really kind of in the weeds technical skills that some of these students have that are coming out of school, that have grown up in an era of internet and open data and applications and things like that. And so one of the things, and you always take a chance. So I had one student reach out to me. They were doing environmental sciences and had some GIS classes, and they really liked the GIS. And so they were kind of wondering how they can get more into that. So I actually recommended that they come to one of the Esri user conferences, the local conferences in Edmonton. And it just so happened, and this had nothing to do with me, but she sat down at a table with somebody from the RCMP, and that RCMP person was hiring students. And that's how she kind of got in the door, right? It's about being able to just have these open conversations with people in your industry, and a great opportunity to start developing that is to go to these different social meetups and these conferences. And I'm guessing a lot of them are online now, but I wholeheartedly offer, as the same as Jeff, if you want to send me your resume, if you have any questions, please reach out to me on LinkedIn, or Samaya has my contact information. I'm kind of guessing you can pass it out, Samaya. I think it would be wonderful to have, and this YPN, like, you guys are here, and this is a perfect opportunity, right? You take advantage of those types of opportunities. There's also, Esri has the GIS Ambassador program. And so I'm a GIS Ambassador, and I go into this, my husband's a teacher. He has no choice. I infiltrate into his classroom every single year. And this is a great opportunity, especially during COVID times. These teachers are going back. Half of them are remote learning. We could all be remote learning again in the fall if there's a second wave. And thinking of ways that you can develop some applications and work with teachers. Esri has some fantastic resources online. There's open source data, there's open source applications, there's so many things that you can do. The one thing I would have to say, so that's from a technology standpoint, but I would love to mentor, and things that I had to kind of learn along the way is that business aspect of GIS and the marketing, and even, like, don't just take a look at it as how you can improve your GIS or get in the foot with GIS. Look at project management, how you can kind of build on your GIS skills and make something come into fruition. Or I took a design thinking class that's helped me immensely in trying to communicate with executive, what problem they're trying to solve and how we can help them solve it. Because a lot of the times we have so many ideas, and I'm kind of going on a tangent, but we have so many ideas, and we have such breadth of knowledge of what this technology can do, but it's not necessarily what people are looking for to answer their questions. A lot of the times they're looking for a very simple solution. And so kind of having that experience and learning how to listen to executive, what the exact problem is, and how to facilitate getting them an application, or maybe it's just a report, or it might not even be a map, something in their hands is invaluable. And so I think that's kind of what I wish that I had, is that kind of business sense, the project management, the business acumen of kind of selling and marketing the technology. So I encourage you, don't just stay focused on the GIS technology and how you can, how we can mentor in terms of GIS and the products we can develop, but how we can mentor and how we can help these students get an idea of the business and how to navigate the business behind it.
I think that's such good advice. I would say that although Twitter is a pit of vitriol and hatred these days, geospatial Twitter is actually a lovely place to hang out, and usually very supportive, and a great place to start conversations, ask questions, and typically not get overtly ridiculed like the rest of the sort of Twitter experience might have fallen into. I don't know, Twitter, I guess I'm aging myself again, but I think that's a great place to start discussions. I think LinkedIn is a great place to start discussions. I'm the first to admit, I don't think SparkGeo would exist without those two tools. To Chris's point, messing around with stuff and building small apps and proofs of concept, and then outlining them as part of your portfolio, I think is really powerful. I think a portfolio is probably a lot more powerful than a traditional resume. You're always going to need the PDF resume to send to someone, but if that's got a bunch of links to things that you've actually done, maybe links to even a GitHub, how other people can do the things that you did, whether it's open or closed source, whatever it is, just having a demonstration of your abilities to build something and make it work, and for it to sit on the internet in some manner, or even just like a tool that you built in code that is repeatable to automate a particular process. That is gold dust for, and will be an instant differentiator in terms of grabbing a job. I think Jeff's absolutely right in terms of the industry needing to do a better job of reaching out to the students. And I think as geospatial just gets hotter and hotter, we're all going to have to do a better job of competing with each other to get great students. And that's the nature of the beast these days. The other thing I was going to say is that hustlers got to hustle, and if you want something, you should maybe figure out how to get it. And that goes both ways: students looking for jobs, but also employers looking for students. So those people who figure out interesting ways with either the students or the employers are going to be at an advantage. And the other thing I was going to say is thespatialcommunity.org, I believe it is. It's a Slack channel. It's got 5,000 geospatial people on it all across the world, worth looking at. It's sort of geospatially agnostic. So there's Esri questions being asked on there every day. There's open source questions. There's people on Planet who are talking about imagery. There's people from all the major geospatial employers doing support, but also having real interesting discussions about pertinent subjects right into your Slack client. So there's a number of really interesting tools that are readily available, and those people who discover those tools early are at a distinct advantage. So I'd say keep your ear to the ground. Look for sort of interesting ways of starting discussions, and maybe these days that is in TikTok, or maybe that is in Instagram. And I'm not there, but there are people who are there, and I think that's a really important message. So sort of growing various tendrils, and in those tendrils are opportunity to have interesting discussions, and you might be one of the first people to have that discussion. And I think that's a really valuable way of sort of demonstrating your abilities and crossing those boundaries.
And Will, I'm just gonna jump back on something that we brought up, these building things. Like there might be people who are saying, well, I'm not a developer, I'm not a coder, I can't build an app. I think that portfolio is an excellent idea, but it doesn't have to be apps. Build a story map. Yeah. Like build a, you did an interesting project. I remember I was through LinkedIn, one of the Fleming students, the instructor there, because of COVID, pointed out, published all these PDFs of some of the maps that some of the students did. And one of them I thought was a really interesting map. And I looked at the map, and I thought, that'd be a great dashboard. So I reached out to the student and I said, hey, and she thought, she agreed. So she fired up, free account, turned her map into a dashboard. And now she's got something live and interactive with a link, and that doesn't require coding. So that, don't just think an app, but, and story maps are really, really, a cool way. Take that project, that essay that you got a good mark on, and turn it into a story map and link to that through your portfolio. That's an easy way to do it.
As a hiring manager, I can tell you how valuable and how refreshing it is when you're going through resume number 206.
Yeah.
When they all look the same, then somebody has a nicely laid out resume, and click here to see my portfolio. You love seeing that, because then you go down a rabbit hole and you get excited and go, look what they can do. And honestly, folks, do that. Do everything that they're saying, because as a hiring manager, that'll put you just that step closer to an interview.
I'm so glad that this was brought up, because this is a perfect segue into something I actually wanted to show, not just the people who are listening right now, but also the panelists and the students who've asked these questions. So what this is, you guys touched up on how a strong portfolio is really important. And so we've kind of put together this GIS student project showcase, where we have a gallery and we also have a survey for students to go in, whether it's a project that they've done at school or after they've completed school, and just put kind of a description, some information about what the actual project is. From there, students or employers can access the gallery. And what this gallery does is it's a portfolio. It's a portfolio for students to put their projects up. So here we've got some examples of some students from some GIS schools across Canada who've put in some their final projects that they had worked on. And like you said, it doesn't need to be an application. So we have examples of PDFs, so they're project posters, or applications. So for this example is a story map about irrigation, drainage, and phragmites. And what the purpose is to have an accessible way for both students to maybe get inspired about what is out there, and for employers to also see what students are working on. There's also options to categorize their projects. So through whatever industry, but also what skill sets were utilized to create the project. So let's say I'm an employer and I'm looking for somebody who had web development in their project. They can go ahead, click, and it'll filter out whichever projects have that categorization. So other categories include the language or the region of focus, or that specific industry that you want to go into. So this is kind of what we wanted to do, create this hub of all these projects in one area. And the awesome part is that if you actually go and view the item details of that project, you'll get a larger description of what's actually happening, but you'll also get access to who created it, their LinkedIn profile, also their resumes or any additional documents that they want employers or other people requiring inspiration to have access to. So this is something that we've put together. We've worked really hard on it. We thought it was a great resource, and we are super excited for not only students to share what they're doing, but have employers take a look at it and use it as a resource.
I think it's an excellent thing. I think it showcases some really powerful tools. I was going to say, when Chris was talking, one of the most compelling pieces about the UC is the map map exhibition. I forget the name of it, but I love wandering around there and sort of looking up at all efforts that people have put in, and none of those are really digital. They're beautiful cartographic paper-based experiences. And although I talk about how Smart Geo is very much focused on the internet, which we are, it's not to say that a beautiful sort of cartographically sort of created experience isn't actually every bit as compelling in the end as some kind of fancy sort of geospatial kind of technology experience. So I think being able to share PDFs is just as good as sharing a piece of code, and having an overt gallery to point out is super powerful for students.
So I have one final question to wrap this discussion up, and honestly, thank you so much for this. I feel like through these discussions, you don't only gain that knowledge, but you also gain that inspiration and that confidence. And I feel like students hearing this and young professionals are gonna, get that confidence by employers such as yourself saying, don't be scared. We want to know what you want to say. And I think that's one of the scariest things that students feel when they're coming into their first profession. And I think just hearing that is a lot and is really just reinforcing that, okay, we are kind of getting these ideas and we can move forward and we do have that support. So I'm really glad we had this discussion. I'm really excited to see what people are going to say. I hope the students listening in got, what they were looking for. So the final question is going to be, in 30 seconds, can you summarize one piece of advice that you feel like a student should really know coming out of school and going into the GIS industry?
I'll hop in and I'll say, it's like Scottish weather. If you don't like it, wait 5 minutes. It's all going to change, and be cool with that.
Samaya, I think you already said it. It's don't be afraid. Yes, it's daunting. Keep in mind, we were once students with a pile of resumes that we were sending out, fingers crossed, hoping. It will happen. It may not happen first time. It might not happen second time. You're going to win some, and you're going to learn from the others. It's not win or lose. It's win or learn. And don't be afraid. If you go through an interview, you talk to somebody and you're not successful, a quick email, thank you for the opportunity. Why? And a potential employer that's not willing to sort of give you pointers as to why you weren't successful, not the kind of company you want to work for anyways, I don't think. They should be willing to take the time to show you where, what you could brush up on. You're going to be learning for the rest of your life. So learning is a journey. When you graduate, you're not finished, you're just starting.
For me, I'd look at things a little differently, and I would say be very clear and intentional on what you want to achieve in your career. Like, what is it you want to do? And then use your jobs as an opportunity to achieve those goals. And this industry will feed you everything you need, but just don't lose track of what it is you want to achieve, right? For me, when I started, I wanted to travel across Canada. So I used this career to work in Alberta and come back. And so, really, it is about you. So be really clear on what you want to achieve in your life and in your career. And I know it sounds corny, but it'll all come to you. I know it sounds a little corny, but it does. When you look back, everything you actually set out in the beginning to achieve, you'll achieve it. So just be clear on your goal.
Absolutely. And I echo everyone's comments. Number one, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of failing. Don't be afraid to cold call. I'm going to use cold call loosely, but reach out to somebody on LinkedIn. Maybe you're enjoying somebody's post and you want to reach out and see how they got to where they are. Keep things simple. You don't need, we see a lot of technology that has all these bells and whistles and alerts going off and all that. You just need to keep it simple. Solve a simple problem. I think that goes a long way. We all know what GIS is, but not everybody does. Try to find different ways to market what you're trying to do. Use different terms like location intelligence. GIS, and this is one of the hardest things that I've learned too, is that, you use GIS when you first start your career for a long time. Nobody knows what you're talking about. And their interest kind of wanes in what you're trying to do. So you need to market yourself. Don't be afraid. Think of other ways that you can market the technology and yourself and what you're trying to do. and just showcase your passion. And, I think at the end of this, most of us that are in our careers, we like to help people. And we like to help people solve their problems through this technology. And that's one of the reasons why we're so passionate, is because we know what GIS can do. So just remain passionate, don't be scared, and keep it simple.
So that about wraps up our panel discussion, and we just want to say thank you so much for staying tuned in, and we really hope you gained that confidence and that inspiration you may have needed from listening to this panel discussion. Now, I want to remind you to please utilize the YPN Student Project Showcase. Our team has been working really hard on it, and we're really excited to launch it, and it is live right now, so check it out. The YPN is also going to be bringing you some more episodes revolving around different themes for more panel discussions in the future. So please stay tuned. We're very excited, and we will see you next time. Bye.